All right, welcome back. So today we're going to dive deep into one of the most powerful strategic frameworks I've ever come across, the AID model. We'll look at its brilliant foundation, sure, but more importantly, we're going to unpack its crucial 2025 evolution, a change that takes it from just a simple diagnostic tool to a full-blown operating system for success. Okay, let's get into it.
So it all really starts with this one fundamental question. I mean, we've all seen it, right? A fantastic idea, a huge market, a team that's just on fire, and yet somehow it still crashes and burns. The original AID model was built to answer exactly that by exposing a single, brutal truth about how value is really created. And that truth, well, it comes from blowing up a really dangerous myth, this idea of additive thinking. You know how we love to do that? We make our lists of pros and cons, and we think our strengths can just cancel out our weaknesses. So you've got a great idea. That's a 10 out of 10. A hungry market? That's a solid 9. But your execution is a 0. In our heads, we do the math. 10 plus 9 plus 0, that's 19. Looks pretty good, right? But reality? Reality doesn't add. It multiplies. And this is the gut punch. 10 times 9 times 0 is still just 0. A single critical failure and the entire venture's value completely collapses. And this right here, this is what we call the zero-factor principle. And it's the absolute core philosophy of the AID model. It forces you to look in the mirror and accept that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. You just can't hide behind your strengths. Your job isn't to hope your pros outweigh your cons. It's to make sure there are no fatal flaws in the first place. So with that in mind, let's meet the hero of our story, the original, or as they call it, the pioneer AID model. For its time, this thing was absolutely revolutionary. It brought a whole new level of brutal strategic honesty to founders, to investors, to everyone. And at its heart was the super elegant but totally unforgiving formula. Y, which is the total value of your venture, is the product of A, your idea quality, times I, your execution capability, times D, the market demand. Think about it. A brilliant idea with no market is completely worthless. And flawless execution of a terrible idea, well, that's just a beautifully engineered failure. And this whole multiplicative approach is kind of genius for a few key reasons. First, it just reflects reality. Value only happens when all three of these pillars intersect and work together. Second, it forces you to prioritize, ruthlessly. It doesn't just show you a weakness. It basically screams at you to go fix your single biggest bottleneck right now. And finally, it exposes those hidden risks, It stops a great score in one area from hiding a fatal flaw somewhere else. And the Pioneer model wasn't just a scorecard. It was a complete strategic cycle. It helped you diagnose the problem. It offered a prescription of specific actions to take. It allowed for correction by rerunning the model over time to see if you'd improved. And it even had a forecasting engine to project where you were headed. But here's the thing, the world doesn't stand still, right? The Pioneer model was brilliant for its time, but the world of 2025, it brought a whole new level of complexity. There were new challenges, new risks that the original model just wasn't built to handle. And that was the turning point. The problem was that these three huge seismic shifts started to really strain the old model. First, you've got the rise of what's called the regulated innovator. Think about it. A brilliant AI idea is totally worthless if it violates a new privacy law. Second, we entered this era of systemic risk. A perfect supply chain doesn't mean much if it can't survive a global pandemic or a shipping crisis. And finally, the demand for purpose. A product the market wants might still fail if it's seen as unethical or bad for the planet. And this quote from the source material just nails it. The old model was a compass for a world that, felt kind of predictable. But it wasn't ready for a world where black swan events, those huge unexpected shocks, started feeling like they were happening every 6 months. A new compass was definitely needed. And that, of course, brings us to the solution, the refined 2025 AID model. Now, this isn't a replacement. Think of it more like a successor, one that takes that unyielding logic of the original and just supercharges it for the world we live in today. Okay, so the first huge upgrade is what they call environmental integration. The old model might have treated stuff like regulations or supply chain risk as an afterthought, something you deal with later. The new refined approach bakes them directly into the core pillars. So now, a factor like regulatory alignment is a fundamental part of your idea score, not just some note in the margin. All right, upgrade number 2, and this one is a total game changer, the resource allocation framework. This is huge because it moves beyond just telling you what to fix. It actually helps you figure out how much to invest in fixing it and with what level of risk. It's the engine that adds some serious capital discipline to your strategy. And this risk throttle is really the key. It stops you from betting the farm on some unproven idea. You start small with minimal risk experiments that don't cost much, just to validate a solution. And only after you have hard evidence that it works do you dial up to moderate or high impact investments. It really forces you into a test before you invest mindset. And the third big piece of the puzzle is this formalized decision loop. It basically turns your strategy from this static, one-time plan into a continuous feedback engine. It helps the whole venture constantly learn and adapt to what's really happening. So here's how that action cycle works in a nutshell. First, you diagnose. Use the model to find your single biggest weakness. Then you test. You run a small, low-cost experiment to see if your fix actually works. If, and only if, that test succeeds, you act, and you implement the full solution. Then you iterate. You rescore the whole venture, find the new bottleneck, and you start the whole cycle all over again. So when you put all of these upgrades together, what do you actually get? Well, you get something that's way more powerful than just a framework. You get a complete strategic operating system for building and scaling a truly resilient venture in this crazy modern world. And this quote just brilliantly captures the new model's power. The original model asked, "What's our weakest link?" The new one asks that, plus, what resources do we need? What risks do we have to manage? And how can we actually adapt to a future we know is going to be uncertain? It's just a much, much more intelligent set of questions. And that's really the ultimate payoff, right? You move from having the static snapshot of your business to having a dynamic, what they call anti-fragile system. You're not just building something that can survive uncertainty anymore. You're building a venture that can actually get stronger from it. So I'll leave you with this one final thought to chew on. What is your venture's functional zero? What's that hidden weakness that looks okay on the surface, but is really built on a foundation of sand? The refined ID model gives you the tools to find it, to fix it, and to build a truly resilient future.